And welcome back. We are now going to look at another way to use text, and in this video let's go ahead and use it to create falling text, where we can create individual letters that are going to fall through the course of an animation. So to get started, I went ahead and imported this background here, and I'm just going to go ahead and lock that background layer because again I don't want to accidentally move this around. And I'm going to go ahead and create a layer for whatever message I want this to be. Now the trick here, when I do falling letters, for example, I cannot put all my text on one layer. Instead, I really have to do it on individual layers per letter, unless I wanted, for example, each word to fall. If I want, for example, let's say this is going to say Happy New Year, I'm going to want each letter to come out, or if I want it by each word, I would put happy, new, and year on each of its own layer. But what I'm going to do today is I'm going to set this up so that way each letter is on its own layer. So let's start here first. This will be H. And so I can just come to my text layer, and I've set it to size 100. I'm going to give it a color that I think is going to be most appropriate. So maybe we can do this red here. That should contrast really nice. So there's just an H right here. And then I can do a new layer. This will be my A. And I can go right next to this H and make it A. I might have to adjust the position of that until I find where I think it's going to best line up visually. And then of course I'm going to repeat this process until I have the message spelled out. So I'm going to go ahead, pause the video. I want you to go ahead and write out Happy New Year. And when we're done, I'm going to bring us back together to move on to the next stage of how we can actually make the animation work. Alright, and I've gone ahead and created my message here, and you can see each letter is on its own layer. And additionally, you will also notice that I have moved the position so it is more centered within my image. You can of course position it to wherever you think it's going to work best for yours, especially if you did, for example, did a different font size. You might have to position it differently. Maybe you wanted your image to have that text appear here at the bottom, maybe you want it at the top. But I decided I wanted mine a little bit more centered here visually. So once I've gone ahead and done that, the next thing is to go ahead and make it so that way we have enough frames for each individual letter. And the way to think about this is how many characters do we have here is going to kind of dictate how many frames we need to put in for our animation. So the easiest way to do that is just add up how many of our characters you have. So happy is 5, new is 3, so that's 8. Plus the additional 5 here because I have the exclamation point. That of course is going to give me, in this case, a total of 13. So 5 plus 3 plus another 5 is 13 frames. Now I could do this, for example, every 5 frames if I want, and that would of course mean I would need 65 total frames of animation. Of course, we might have, for example, our first 5 frames would be maybe nothing is here, but we want this to happen right away. So we're going to say every 5 frames, we're going to want a letter to fall down here in our animation. So 13 times 5 is 65, so I need 65 frames of animation. So I'm just going to go ahead and start with that first frame, hold down the Shift key, click on this last frame, and you'll notice it will select every one of those frames that I have here. And I'm just going to right click and insert frame. And now we have enough frames here to go ahead and start our animation. Now the trick here is going to be is that we want each of these layers to be motion tweens. So I'm going to go ahead and walk you through a few of these here just to kind of show you what we need to do. And what I actually want to do first, before I even set up those motion tweens, I'm actually going to pull this timeline back to the first frame, and I'm going to actually use my selection tool to select my text. Because I want to do is, in my example, I'm going to have my text fall down from the top. You might have your text coming from the side or from the bottom, but for our practice today, let's focus on just having that text come down from the top. So with this in position, I'm going to hold the Shift key, and I'm just going to simply move this text up off frame here. So it's out of the canvas, but I want to bring that eventually back down to where I want it to be. And that might take a little positioning for us to kind of get used to, but the reason why I'm going to do it off frame here is because I want this set up in a way that it's going to make it easier for me to do this. Otherwise, I'd have to do this each individually, and this way I can just bring everything down to the position that I want them to. And so this is one way to do it. And again, you can also do this individually with the individual letters. You could start with it here, and you could move them up and out. Those are both ways to do it. So This is, of course, one way. Again, the other way is if you start here and then you can drag the individual letters out with your motion tweens. So let's go ahead and just show one of those two ways. Of course, the other way works just as well, but I'm just going to show you the one way today, which I'll show you the individual letter approach. And so let's start first with our letter H, and let's go ahead and right click and create a motion tween. And you will see that this layer now is set up as a motion tween layer. And all I want to do is take this letter H, and again, I'm going to hold down the shift key, and I'm going to bring that up to the point where it's just off that canvas. And what I want that frame to do is it's going to start the position of this H up here, but then by the 5th frame, so I'm going to go to frame 5. I want this H then, again holding the shift key so I can maintain position, I want this to fall back down to where I want it to line up. And you will see that we add a little position piece here in our keyframes. And so if we were to play this animation currently, you will see that this H then falls down into place. All right, now the trick for the next couple letters is going to come in a little differently. So let's go ahead and move on to our A here. And let's go ahead and right click and create a motion tween just as we did before. And you will see that this is now a motion tween. And what I want to do is again, hold that shift key down and move that A up to the top here. So I have my starting position. However, the real kind of trick here that we're going to have to deal with is that this A is now going to be coming down at the same time as the H. We want it to come down after the H has already fallen. So in order for us to do that, we're actually going to go here to our timeline here, and we actually want to bring this in. And the trick for that is we want to make sure we get the right arrow here. We don't want this arrow with the lines in it because that's going to move our layers panel around. Instead, we want this double-headed arrow, and we're just going to click and drag and bring this in to the 5th frame. Go ahead and release, and you will see that we kind of have this empty frame setting up here. All right, so there's nothing happening here, and so then A is actually going to appear here. So if I were to back this up to frame 1, you will see at frame 1 there is no letter A. It's because it is not actually being animated into place until frame 5. Now we can do the same thing as we did with our H. We can go to frame 10, and I'm going to click on that A, hold down the shift key, and I'm just going to go ahead and bring that A down into place. All right, now that that is in place, if we were to play this animation just from these two letters, you can see how the A will then just pop down in place. And then we were going to repeat this process for the next letter. So again, letter P, right click, create motion tween. I'm going to hold down the shift key and bring that P up into position here. Make sure though first you are on frame 1. I almost missed that. So again, holding down on that P, hold the shift key, bring it up, get that double-headed arrow in here, and then just drag that over to frame 10. And then once we are at frame 15, I'm going to click on that P, hold down the shift key again, and drag that into place. All right, that should give you a good idea of how to get started with this. So I'm going to go ahead, pause the video, let you go ahead and animate the rest of these letters, and let's come back here at the end and see how this turns out. All right, I've gone ahead and created all my motion tweens and adjusted the starting position here with each of these having a 5-second interval. So that way these come in 5 seconds after when we start the animation. So if I go ahead and play this animation, you will see that each letter comes in at its own correct timing. And that is all that we really need to worry about. One thing I do want to mention though real quick is if we wanted to make it so letters came in and then faded away or simply just disappeared, we of course could just come here to our different timeline pieces. If I were to drag this from the other side, just to show you here with the letter R, if I were to play this animation as is with these last few frames off, you will notice that that R will then disappear. So just a quick little note there that if they are not visibly there in those frames, that nothing will be actually rendered here within our animation. So that gives us another cool trick that we can do with text by making each individual letter fall. It is a little bit more tedious in having to create individual layers for each letter, but again, it gives us a lot more control over the different things that we can do.